And okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Diverse Perspectives webinar. My name is Joseph Powell, and today I have the distinct honor to host our speaker, Ujijji Davis Williams. Um, and yeah, we just give a bit of background on Ujiji Davis Williams is a practicing landscape architect, urban planner, and researcher based in Detroit. She is the founding partner and principal of Jima Studio. Prior to Jima Studio, Ujiji served as associate at Smith Group, um, leading critical landscape and urban design work, including neighborhood planning, greenways, and streetscapes in post-industrial cities across the country. Um, Everyone, please welcome Ujiji Davis. And you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate the invite to participate and the introduction. You'll just have to bear with me. I'm just getting over a little bit of a cold, so if I sound a little bit in and out, feel free to just kind of um, say something in the chat. Um, but yeah, today for the Diverse Perspectives webinar, I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that Jima Studio is doing around participatory design. And so today's presentation is called Participatory Design in Practice. I will give a little bit of background on the studio and then dive into a couple of projects that um, focus or are centered around participatory design as the kind of main vehicle on how our practice works, but also specifically how those projects were achieved. Okay. Sure. Okay. I just want to, before I get started, I wanted to offer a plug, if you will. Um, this is a picture of some really incredible and talented landscape architecture professionals in Washington, D.C. in the year 2018. And this was based on a diversity summit that the National ASLA hosted um, to think about or kind of build a think tank around other Black and Brown practicing on uh, landscape architects and landscape architecture professionals on how to increase exposure and opportunities within the field. So I'm just offering this as a nod to this webinar series, how opportunities like this is really important to see yourself and a community of people that are interested in a lot of the same things that you're interested in, as well as doing the same things that you are doing. This was a really pivotal moment in my career when I met all of these wonderful people because it just changed my outlook on what I thought I could do with the profession, the network and relationships I was able to build, and of course the friendships that I've had that are now lifelong.
Yeah, Gigi, before you continue, can I just ask that you try your video one more time? I think okay,
Huzzah!
nice. All right. Okay.
Great. So just a little background on the studio. Jima, the name of our studio stems from a Kwanzaa principle. There are 7 days in Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is a non-religious holiday in December that is focused on celebrating African American heritage. Ujima is the third day, which means collective work and responsibility. It says principles based in the Swahili language in East Africa. And the principle that's associated with this word is to build and maintain our community together and to make our brothers and sisters problems our problems and to solve them together. And so that is the ethos of the studio is collective work and responsibility, thinking about design as the vehicle for helping to kind of solve problems, whether they're site-based or socioeconomic based. We know that design has the power to tackle a lot of different issues. And then responsibility, really thinking about designers, or in our case, our studio, as an accountability partner in helping these issues get resolved in a way that is collective um, and impactful. So then I'll just jump right into the presentation for today. Participatory design stems from participatory planning, which is the process of involving members of a community around proposed physical or programmatic changes of the places that they love, places that they live, work, play, go to school, etc. Oops, oops. Okay, good. Now my arrows work. Okay, great. Um, the thing about participatory planning, especially within design, is really thinking about what does the involvement of community members actually means, and then how does design help to move ideas and physical elements forward. So I tried to break this down into maybe four key units: context, consensus, action, and accountability. I'll try to go through this just because it's a lot of text, but context is really understanding the state of the site and the impacted people as the starting point. So, understanding the history, understanding why this project is now important, what it used to be used as, if it is a thing, a physical space, or what are people looking to use it as something in the future. Consensus, elevating critical issues and confirming what is important to address. Oftentimes, especially in community engagement, we hear a laundry list of things that are wrong, but we know that we can't actually respond to each and everything. So we try to build participatory planning is also centered around building consensus that allows people to prioritize what is important as a means to move a design forward. Action, develop next steps through design, which is ultimately where the fun stuff happens, and where you start to take some of that site history, take some of those priorities, and begin to put them in a strategy or a design that makes sense. And then accountability, supporting key players in achieving their goals through implementation. Our roles as designers can stop at design, but I believe that they don't have to, that there are opportunities for us to continue to engage our community members, our clients, design partners, to make sure that these projects that were built on consensus continue to happen. So I have three projects here to share. And I wanted to just kind of talk about how participatory design is centered across the three projects. I'll just get started with the first one. Wayne State University Divine Nine Plaza, which is based here in Detroit. You might see a couple familiar faces in here with the team. But this was a student-led, university-backed effort where the student leaders of the National Pan-Hellenic Council, which is the governing body for African American fraternities and sororities, approached the university and more or less, I don't want to say asked, but more or less lobbied for uh, a personalized and sacred space that honored their fraternities and sororities as historic facets of the campus. There are a number of these that started to pop up across the country in the early 1900s as African Americans were being admitted into in some cases, they were admitted to predominantly white institutions and colleges, but did not maybe receive a lot of the same academic support, or were subject to campus violence, or for universities that were founded because African Americans were not at the time allowed to go to school with white students. So these organizations historically have been safe havens for um, African American students on campus to provide different types of resources that they would need to be successful. And so these groups of students approached the school in identifying that they wanted a place on campus that would honor that history as well as be a performative space for them to do some of their traditions, shows, graduation ceremonies, etc. So the first thing, so that was the context in which we were understanding the project. That there were students that thought this was valuable, there was a university that was willing to listen to them, and there was potentially an opportunity to financially support this project. The next was building consensus. So we developed a very straightforward engagement strategy through a series of focus groups where we asked a series of questions of what we thought that the students wanted to relay through the design. What is the story we are trying to tell with this landscape? Why is it important? What are the takeaways that we want from this experience, especially for people who are not affiliated with these sororities and fraternities? How do you want to feel in this space? Through that, we documented what we heard and gave us an opportunity to start to think about elements that were important to the students that we thought we could convey through design. We also wanted to share with them press of other colleges and universities that have these Divine Nine plazas on their campus as well. So we wanted to understand the merits of these elements, the heights, the materials, the relationship between spaces, the program that's associated with them, so that we could have a better understanding of what the students expected to do with their plaza at Wayne State. Some of the additional context that we also investigated was looking at the proposed site that the university offered, thinking about this is in Midtown Detroit, and Detroit is famously known for its historic redlining. We were able to identify that there were key areas within this neighborhood that were redlined to be predominantly Black and predominantly low income. We thought that while that does not necessarily, that wasn't an element that dictated the design, there was an element of how do we elevate the working class narrative that it also supported these students as they arrived at Wayne State. And just another image of the highlighted area where our project site is that was redlined for grade D, which was the lowest score you could get. Excuse me one moment. Okay. So the National Panhellenic Council was the governing body on the campus that was leading this effort. And here are some existing pictures of the site that the university proposed. This is off of, hey buddy. This is off of a main mall, and oh, there we go. Childcare is real. So there were some, this is off of one of the main malls on campus, but it was largely underutilized by students, A lot of the infrastructure that they had was in disrepair and wasn't as inviting of a location as I think the students had imagined that it would be. So there are a lot of different elements that ultimately the students decided that they wanted a full redesign, that there weren't too many things about this that they wanted to keep. And so we get to the action part, where we start to build what are we going to do through design. And so there were a number of studies that were performed to understand the overall geometry of the site. How do we integrate? Um, you can see these vertical elements, which we call the totems. Each organization, as 9 organizations, required their own individual area or space that allowed them to share information, stand in front of, and the idea was that there was no hierarchy amongst the totems, that they all had to stand with the same amount of space without any one organization being highlighted more than the other one. And so we played with a couple of different orientations within the site constraints that we had, trying to understand what was the best layout. And so we started to winnow down to 2 different options. A lot of them had some of the same characteristics. In this one, you see we have our vertical totems. Each one had its own space. You also see this the patterning with the hardscape and the grass area starting to resemble a gear, which was indicative of the working class history of the neighborhood. We also begin to see a stronger kind of frontage than what was there before, with a low seat wall and planting, and then a conversation pit in the center, which was had the opportunity to look inward or outward at the totems. The other option was similar geometry with the semicircle, but the main difference here was a circular kind of platform, tiered platform with steps, and a low seat wall in the center with the signage. The difference here is that there was an opportunity to um, have more seating space or even performance space that the other option did not allow for. And then also in a opportunity to try to save some of the trees, this option helps to kind of preserve some of the existing landscape that's already on site. So the final design actually merged both of those options together. The students really liked elements of the first, liked elements of the second, and so we were able to piece the best of both options together into a final design approach, which maintains the semicircle for each of the totems. It maintains the gear as one of the design elements, but it also begins to put together that central planter with the tiered steps as a central place for gathering, um, seating, studying, hanging out. The students thought that this was a much more collegiate, I guess, campus space that allowed them to not just engage with the totems, but also just with their their fellow students. Uh, we also heard that this was going to be a destination for student tours. And so just thinking about an opportunity to stop and rest and see what there is to see. And for the joy of the landscape architects, we were able to preserve the trees, which is great. So just another view at the pedestrian scale and another view inside. And so this project was really successful because we were able to really hear the students, what they wanted, what they needed, understand the opportunities and limitations the university offered, and really thinking about how do you create a space that is sacred to one group of people, but also has to function as a public space for everyone? And I believe that that was achieved. And so these renderings were developed to support an alumni campaign to solicit additional funds to build this on campus. And that is the Divine Nine. The second project that I'm going to share is the Slum Busters Garden in Chicago. The 80s, I think late 80s, or no, early 80s, late 70s, at a time in Chicago where there was a lot of disinvestment, specifically of African American neighborhoods in the city. And an elderly couple at the time took over a vacant lot nearby their home, and they called it the Gerald and Lorraine Earls Peace Park. They solicited young people from the neighborhood that did not have, they weren't in school or they weren't in after school programs to help clean up the vacant lots. They helped to beautify the neighborhood by bringing beautiful landscape and growing food on site. And this is all underneath Chicago's city rail line. This is where the series of vacant lots exist. However, since then, the Earls passed away, and they did not uh, own the land, nor was the land then being taken care of after they passed away. So there was a new life of other community members that knew the history that wanted to keep the legacy of the Earls Peace Park Garden. However, they didn't necessarily know where to start. And so Jima Studio was invited by the Chicago Architecture Biennale to conduct a workshop around developing ideas of of how the Peace Park could be potentially updated to the what was relevant to neighbors and volunteers at the time. So just an Google aerial image of the lots. You can see the green lots underneath the rail line, and a couple panoramic views of the garden between buildings, between houses, across an alley. So as I said, we conducted a workshop. So the team went out to Chicago and interviewed neighbors, stakeholders, volunteers, just other engaged people that were really interested in how this green space could be reinvested. And we talked a little bit about what we might want to do with the site, and also what the impact that they wanted to have. And so this is just a clip of a couple of notes of what was said, wanting to have an identity, sanctuary, relaxation, just thinking about a lot of different things for the space. We also did a site walk where we invited that same group of people to come onto the site, and we gave them a few prompts on cards to answer, and just really thinking about this as more than a physical space, but also potentially a spiritual space that has a legacy that of groups of people really caring about the neighborhood that would need to be emulated again. And in doing that, then we kind of looped all these elements together and thinking about them as physical improvements, programming, or the type of experience that that the participants wanted to have. And that allowed us to identify some specific things that could be incorporated into the new vision for the Slum Busters Garden. So just a quick sketch of the kind of areas that were incorporated. The kind of green boxes highlight the vacant lots that were associated with the project. and a really kind of quick and dirty diagram of some of the opportunities. And another diagram of another conceptual diagram of how that begins to manifest in physical space. So they wanted an opportunity for murals with local artists, to grow food and flowers, incorporating public art and sculptures, thinking about outdoor classrooms to teach local kids about growing. And there are a lot of just different opportunities underneath this rail line to explore that supported all of the different interests of folks that wanted to be associated with the garden. So just a couple more views of what that could look like. And the last project that I'll share is the Greenleaf Gardens Houses Landscape in Washington, D.C. Great. Okay. The Greenleaf Gardens is a public housing development in the southwest portion of Washington, D.C. It was developed in as workforce, post-war workforce housing, and they are maybe one of the last housing developments that has yet to be upgraded and updated to new standards. So that means that a lot of these houses have not been have been updated and repaired, but not to the scale of other affordable housing projects in Washington, D.C. And so this housing development is actually now subject to be demolished. And the housing authority is looking to, while construction is happening, they wanted to implement some landscape improvements that made the area continue to feel and look good while they were then transitioning residents into newly updated, complete, beautiful state of the art new apartments based on their current living situations. So this is a relatively controversial project in terms of the phasing of the developments and which units are which residents are being transferred to which units at what time. But we were really excited to be a part of the landscape approach as a means to improve the 3 blocks of housing in DC as a means to enhance the overall experience that these residents have been living for in some cases for 30, 40 years. So this is just a picture of a group of the participants at one of the engagement sessions where they won raffles. So that's them showing that off. But thoroughly engaged and interested in how to make some of those physical improvements safe for themselves and also safe for their kids. And this is another group of folks. So we were working with an architect at the time who was also looking to do some new construction build on the site. But this partnership allowed us to think about the different types of indoor and outdoor programs that residents wanted to see. Some of them were based around safe spaces for their children. Others were based around entrepreneurial spaces, as a lot of them operate small businesses out of their homes. And just really thinking about how to codify and make a little bit more real some of the hustle, I guess, culture, you'll call it, that's happening in the housing development. So within that session of the photos that I shared earlier, we were able to identify, what's the best, what's the experience. Sure, sure, sure. The experience of Greenland. What are we, when we talk about outdoor spaces and open spaces, what does that look and feel like? What elements, be quiet, what elements do we want to incorporate as far as DC culture? Are there sustainability things that people are concerned about that they now is the time to talk about? And so we just kind of scattered a lot of notes. One of the things that came out of this was the uh, clear reality and perception of the housing development not being safe. So there are a number of incidents of violent crime in the neighborhood, and we were charged with helping to figure out how to resolve that through landscape design. So these are a couple pictures of the housing development. You can see, especially with new construction all around it, it is they are low rise apart kind of townhouse apartment styles. They're very much outdated. In some cases, not very accessible for those who are bound to wheelchairs. Also, there's no sense of privacy. The same kind of openness of as the front door exists at the back door. And so there are not many opportunities for people to have personal space here. Everything is very exposed. And as I said before, this housing development comes on the heels of post-war housing development, in which poor African Americans were offered opportunities to live here from an affordable standpoint, and it became a hotbed for discourse of what public housing and the discrepancies between public housing built for white Americans versus for Black Americans. So that was the context that we were working in, and the consensus we built through the community engagement, and really thinking about these highlighted areas. These four areas were the key spaces of improvement that the residents wanted the design teams to focus on. These are also probably would be considered the larger, more communal spaces throughout the three blocks. Everywhere else is very much focused on the residential. It's either the front yard or the backyard or parking. So these numbered areas are really the only spaces where it's big enough for folks to gather, although there isn't really infrastructure to support gathering. So what we did to kind of help build consensus about what the design could be, and this is kind of between building consensus and developing the action, is we did these kind of before and after sequences that began to define what was possible in some of these barren spaces between buildings. And so this is just a street view of the first area. And we know that we can populate this with a play place. This is actually closer to where a lot of families with young children live, and thinking about an opportunity to incorporate that. So we've got screening from both fencing and landscape, thinking about that from a security standpoint. We can improve the sidewalks, we can add more trees, we can add more places to sit, and really make this empty space um, a destination within the housing development. This was the larger space. As you can see, the trees that they do have are beautiful and mature, but they are encaged in these metal iron cages or crates. And so they don't actually allow people to sit underneath them and really enjoy them. And so we started to think about, well, what if you just start to take those out and we build seating around, instead of the cages there. We build seating, that, people can sit on, and maybe it presents an opportunity to bring, another element like a food truck or some other, component that would, establish this um, as a place as a place and destination. This third area, um, as you can see with all of the garbage cans, is the rear of the units, but it is largely exposed. There is no buffer. And so, but there was a basketball hoop. So we thought that this was big enough. We knew we could make this a full court. So this became a court, with landscape around it and an opportunity to use seating as a means to buffer, and separate, the backyards of residents to this new communal space. And with the new court, surface, this now becomes a place that people can go, and the program is also very clear. Um, we also thought that this would be a great opportunity for, kind of mini leagues within the housing development as a means to engage young folks, as many of the residents thought that a lot of the young folks that live within the area didn't have that much to do. And the last area, again, these beautiful trees, trapped in cages, and we wanted to think about how those, come away. And so we started to think about, again, maybe these are places for seating and platforms. We also thought about this as maybe it's an opportunity for a market. Some of the program that the partnered architect, was proposing was maybe small scale pop-up or small scale retail spaces in some of these vacated, buildings. And so maybe that's an opportunity to bring that, program from the inside outside when it would be appropriate. And then, I mentioned this again, but the front and the rear yards, have a lack of personalization. They are fully accessible to anyone, which limits the sense of security, or the reality of security. And it's largely just unutilized space, um, that does not offer any relief from the sun or offer any, nice quality of wanting to be back there or in front. And so we came up with a couple of different ideas of how we would respond to the backyards and the front yards, thinking about how we incorporate seating, garbage pads, trees, and landscape to create stronger buffers between units, um, as well as offering new beautification. And so, again, this is what the backyards look like, and we have an opportunity to, uh, just make these a little bit more, give these a little bit more structure in a way that, supports, safer rear access to the units. We also, again, safety was a big concern, and so, between a lot of the buildings, there are also open spaces, and, we thought it would be a great idea to incorporate fencing. That was actually one of the requests of the residents, was that they wanted, a fence, they could access the key fob, that would limit how many, strangers or folks that are not affiliated or not related to residents, had access to, their personal spaces, which is a real thing. There's a bus stop right off of one of the streets that leads you, if you didn't know where you were going, you could go straight into the housing development. So the, fencing strategy started to think about a couple options. A vertical panel fence was one, where we had irregular heights to offer some type of architectural interest. And we then buffered that with landscape to really soften that perception of that this is a fence strategy that while it limits access, we didn't want to create a wall for residents within. The other option, which is what the client wanted to go with, was a perforated fence that uses holes to develop different opacities to be able to see through. Um, and we wanted to also soften that with the landscape so that, again, it doesn't feel like a wall inside. But both options really consider sun and shade and materiality as a means to align with the current architecture, even though it's not necessarily the most groundbreaking um, uh, townhouses in DC. And so this is just a section rendering with the landscape plan with the architect's work and what they intend to do with some of the spaces and some of the buildings. So you can see some of our trees, some of our landscape buffers, and the fencing. And the architect wanted to incorporate murals and graffiti in some of these buildings that would be vacated first as a way to continue to activate those buildings even though they won't be used. And so this is looking into that market area with the landscape. And then looking in a different direction of the market area. So that is a little bit about what we do. Just to recap, participatory planning focuses on establishing context, building consensus, developing actions, and uh, supporting our partners through accountability, through implementation, and really thinking about how we start, how we arrive at the site, and the people that it will impact, how we prioritize what is important, how we develop next steps through design, and how we help our partners achieve their goals. So that's what we do.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Ujijji, for your presentation. It's a
Yeah,
lot of
thanks
great
for having
stuff.
me.
Mm,
Thanks for having me.
definitely. Yeah, a lot of great projects. Um, so yeah, now I would like to open it up for questions for the last few minutes that we have in the webinar. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box so that I can read them to Ujiji. Um, yeah. Um, yeah, just wait for those, and I think we'll give it a good 5 or 7 minutes. And then if we don't have anything after that time, I think we can go ahead and call it. If
Okay.
that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Nice, nice. Um, yeah, so I actually have a question myself. Um,
sure.
yeah, so I was wondering with the projects like the one that you showed in Chicago, I know or at least from some of the text that I saw, it said on I think the firm's first baby or like just somewhere around there in terms of when the project was done. I was wondering if you've had a chance to sort of follow up with that project and see if on or just check in on the construction or just see if the client went through with it or not.
Yeah. I would say the latest that I've engaged with folks on that project was last year, but the most recent time
Okay.
was last year. And I mean, I'll say that we did a concept design, so it wasn't really for them to, they had the option to decide if they wanted to build it the way that we showed it.
Okay.
But a lot of those elements that was incorporated are there. Um, they've incorporated a lot of like art by young people, excuse me, from the nearby school. There is also a um, an urban farm organization that's around the corner that they're partnered with.
Hmm.
Um, so so yeah, I haven't been back physically to the site, but that is, from what I understand, the latest in terms of the information that I have. I will also say that a lot of the partners that were affiliated with that project were still very much in touch.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a
Okay.
good question. I should definitely probably check in and see where they are. That project was a little while ago now. So
Hmm. Nice, nice. Yeah, it just um seems like such an interesting project, especially being under on what I would assume are decommissioned tracks. Or
no, it's active.
oh
It's
wow,
an active.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's I don't know what they call it, the CAT, I guess.
Okay.
Oh shit. Or CTA, sorry. Chicago Transit Authority. Yeah, no, it's an active rail line and there's a stop. So people can see you and you can see them from if you're below. Um, so that was also one of the things that um the residents wanted to think about was when people look down on the garden, what do they see? And
Okay.
so one of the design elements was we called it the accordion mural, which just was a series of wall panels that were um, uh, against one of the buildings so that you had a view on your way inbound or outbound on the train. If you couldn't see all of the landscape, you could see some of the art either on your way in or out on the rail line. So it was something that we tried to think about in the design process, but it was yeah, it's an active line uh, and ultimately then becomes part of the experience of this very tranquil place that just kind of interrupts your um, interrupts your experience every like 10 minutes, you know.
Oh wow. Nice, nice. Yeah, that makes it even cooler even. That's that's great. But yeah, yeah, like thank you so much for the explanation. Um yeah, so honestly, maybe we'll give it until 6:55 and then just go ahead and call it then. Yeah, unless yeah. I
Okay,
think that would be a good place to end it. But yeah, so
great.
are you guys working on any new projects now or any latest projects?
New projects. Um, I would say the biggest project that we have is the Henry Ford Health System in Michigan State University Research Center, which they had the groundbreaking a couple weeks ago to kind of announce that the project was underway. So that's a big one for us. And we're finalizing all of our construction documents this week. So I'm quite tired, but yeah, I would say that's the biggest one. But no, no, no new projects at this time. So we're just always looking.
Nice, nice. Nice. Well, yeah, yep. Thank you again for on yeah for being the panelist on this webinar, and yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. I'll go ahead and end this here.